Hello, hope everyone's doing well. So for our group project, we chose homelessness and the juvenile justice system. This was done by myself, Monica Cooper, Kayla Gonzalez, Amanda Sandy, and Wilson Francis. So the goals of this presentation, we're going to be introducing the juvenile justice system, homeless youth, and the child welfare system. These are three separate institutions that are all very deeply correlated with one another. And so we're going to be showing how they interact. We're going to be defining important terms relating to the juvenile justice system and homeless youth. How are you going to learn if you don't know what we're saying? So that's super important. We're going to be talking about different intervention and prevention methods. We're going to be discussing why learning about this is so important. And then we're going to take all this information and say, what can we do about it now? How can we implement it into one big resource to really help this problem? If I can get it to go, bear with me. Okay. So, youth homelessness and kids entering the juvenile justice system. So, as Kayla will later define for us, homeless youth are defined as a person under the age of 21 who's experiencing lack of safe and reliable housing slash environments. Um, so you can see my diagram in the top left corner. So 1 in 10 adults 18 to 25 years old and 1 in 30 13 to 17 years old experience homelessness in the course of a year. In a single year, it's been averaged that 4.2 million of the homeless are adolescents or young adults. That's kind of a scary number. And 700,000 of these um, are completely on their own, while the rest, they might be living with their friends, they could be couch surfing, et cetera, et cetera. So many of the homeless youth, they wind up in trouble with the law. They're kind of in this state of survival, and I would think that they're going to do anything that they can to survive. Um, so then that's where they come into play with the juvenile justice system. And of these homeless youth, 44% have stayed in jail, prison, or in juvenile detention center. Nearly 78% have had at least one interaction with the police, and nearly 62 have been arrested at some point in their lives. So it's very likely that if you are homeless, you're going to wind up in trouble with the cops at some point. Very likely, almost a 50% chance. And that's shown in the diagram in the bottom right. So who are the homeless youth? Who are these individuals that are living out on the streets? So I just want to say that getting an accurate number and accurate statistic of these youth are super difficult. Their parents don't always report them as runaways or homeless. And I'm just putting myself in their shoes as a teen. I wouldn't like to admit when I need help. So I probably wouldn't report myself as homeless. Um, we do know that females are more likely to seek help when suffering from homelessness. So there has been a reported even number of both male and female, but this could be because males are less likely. So there's a possibility that the actual number of males who are suffering from homelessness is a little bit higher. So 6% of the population in the United States belong to unaccompanied or youth who are living completely on their own. And then 86% of homeless youth are 18 to 24 years old. So that means that 24% are under the age of 18. They're not even an adult yet, um, which is really sad to think about. The LGBT community makes up 20 to 40% of the homeless youth. And let me just put this in perspective for you. So the LGBT community is only 3 to 5% of our entire population. Our entire population. 3% is a pretty small number. Um, and then when you compare that to homeless youth, it is 20 to 40%. So it is exponentially large. So We see an overrepresentation of the LGBT community. And as you can see as our diagram on the right, a huge overrepresentation of the Black community, specifically Black males. Um, just trying to get my computer to work. Oop, too far. Okay. And so now I'm going to be talking about how did they end up where they are now. You could be walking down the street and you see someone homeless wrapped up in a blanket on the corner, and you think to yourselves, like, man, how did they let themselves get there? Well, it has this awful stigmatization around it because people who are homeless are usually victims of their environment. Um, we've seen that the family history of homeless youth is usually extremely dysfunctional and unstable. Their parents may have been abusive or neglectful. They might have witnessed violence within their home, such as domestic abuse. They struggle with substance abuse. They struggle with mental illnesses, and they could have huge financial issues. So, these youths, they usually have super unstable childhood. They usually haven't lived with both their parents. Sometimes they're in the child welfare system. They are lucky if they've lived with at least one of their biological parents. So their families are usually pretty broken, and they've usually moved around from place to place. So homelessness youth, or homeless youth, I'm sorry, um, can be victims of abuse. Their childhood may have been riddled with pain, and we see a lot of sexual abuse in the youth of the homeless. So when we look at all that information and we take their history and their background, um, you can't really blame them. I mean, a lot of these kids, especially if they're LGBTQ, they have been kicked out of their house or they are running away from something. They are running away from their environment. Um, you look at it and they would rather live outside in the cold, in the snow, in the rain, rather than live in their bed with their parents or with their family. So you don't know what's going on in their lives. Um, so how is the juvenile justice system and homelessness, how are they interconnected? How do they relate? So um, I was in one of my articles, it explains the juvenile justice system and the child welfare system as silos. They are completely independent. They are two separate institutions, and they do not collaborate with one another. Even though um, they are deeply interconnected, they do not share their information, they do not share their resources. So, this is a huge issue. So, foster kids usually face many challenges. They don't live with their own family. Um, and they experience so much more, sometimes abuse. They move around constantly. And so when they finally do age out, it can be hard for them to keep a job, to find a job, to find a place to live. So a lot of them discover homelessness within the next 2 years. And while they are homeless, like I said, they're in survival mode. Um, a lot of them attempt to make money through prostitution. They sell themselves. They sell drugs. They get involved with drugs. They steal. And this puts them at risk of being in trouble with the law. And that brings us to the juvenile justice system. And the juvenile justice system, they go through their sentencing, and then it's like, where do they end up now? Because they still don't have family to lean back on. They don't have resources. And so a lot of them are homeless once again, and then back into the juvenile justice system. So you can see in this little diagram in the bottom right corner that sometimes they can be both in the child welfare system and the juvenile justice system. We call this dual youth. Um, and then they get involved with homelessness. But once they are homeless, it is so easy for that vicious cycle to keep on turning. So that is why this is so important, to really find out a better methodology method to get them out of this. And so I'm going to throw it over to Kayla and she's going to explain a little bit about the definitions.